Good morning, good day.
Good morning, good day. How are you? How is
Different time
this?
zones.
Yeah, I know. We're usually much closer in time. So it is afternoon here and morning there.
Yes,
Yeah.
8 a.m. Maui
Okay.
time.
One
I
o'clock.
guess is it Pacific time?
No, it's beyond Pacific. You're several time zones past Pacific.
I'm way out in the Pacific.
One time zone past Pacific. I don't know, something. You're in the middle of the ocean.
I am.
In the middle of the Pacific
First
Ocean.
thing we did when we got off the plane, that's what we did. We went and jumped in the ocean. And there was a big old turtle like on the beach, like huge, right? Like
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't have my camera on me, but I was like, I've never seen a big turtle like that on the beach. And there was nothing wrong. He was like, there was people just looking at him, and my friend said that he was just taking a break.
It's just hanging out on the
Yeah.
beach.
But he was like huge. Like I couldn't believe how big it
Yeah.
was. I've seen turtles around. Yeah.
Yeah, they in Virginia Beach, about 2 hours from me, they have a sea turtle rescue as part of the aquarium there, and they're baby sea turtles. They're so cute. They're little, but then they have full-grown adults that can't be released because their health conditions won't allow it. And they're enormous. These giant loggerhead turtles, they're just so big, and this giant tank. And you can actually look at the tank on different levels. It's multi-story, but it's really cool that they have that because the turtles come up on Virginia Beach to lay eggs or to whatever migratory. I don't know what they're doing there, and sometimes they're injured and they can't go back. But they do um, yeah, they do incubate the little ones and get them to a size and release them, which is pretty cool. So you
Mm,
can do that. Well,
yeah.
that's neat. So turtles like it there. Do you like it there?
Yes. Yeah. From the time that I stepped on the ground.
Uh-huh.
Very grounding here.
Mm-hmm.
The energy is like a flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a flow state.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I very unique. Like I've been to a lot of places in the world and I can't even believe the feeling, the like when I hear Hawaii, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think of it as not as part of us, like over here in the Western world,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Right.
And but like it's a part of America, but I can't distinguish that for some reason. Like I'm just in it's like a
Well,
different place, like a different dimension, like a different energy than
well,
what America to me represents, you know?
it's only part of that place because we made it be part of yeah, it's only part of our space because we required it to be. It is what it is. It is
Right.
not. Yeah.
And maybe that's why I'm confused.
Yeah. 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 The
Yeah,
the the indigenous life of many millennia
exactly.
existed
Yeah.
there before we decided to declare it something else. I remember reading about like English missionary women who would go and it was September, so it was time to put on wool and they'd wear wool clothing in Hawaii because it was September and that's just what you did, but independent of where they were and you know, what was actually happening around them, the temperature and whatever. So
Yeah.
it's interesting you say flow. Think about an island in the middle of the Pacific is
Yeah. I
so present
know. Yeah.
to flow, to
Like I'm
water.
I'm an islander. Like I live in Newfoundland,
Yeah,
and like we call it the Rock,
yeah,
right? And it's very grounding there too. And that island is in the Atlantic Ocean, right?
right.
Just, it's the only island that's just off,
Hmm.
right, of Canada. And I find it very grounding there.
Yeah.
And I find it very grounding here, but it's a different state, like a flow. Like I even went for a drive here and I
Uh-huh.
noticed, and I've driven around like different places, not a lot of places, but different places in different parts of the world
Yeah.
where I can, you got to go with the traffic,
Yeah.
right? And it can be
Yeah.
very chaotic in India,
Yeah,
compared
right.
to the UAE, compared to
Yeah.
Thailand, right?
Yeah.
And here it was quite interesting because I was
One road.
the vehicle here in one, no, three lanes. Three, it's very
Well, no, I'm saying
uh,
is like they don't it's one direction, there's a smaller number of roads in Hawaii than there are in India. That's what I was talking
oh
about.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, there's
That's
yeah.
another conversation to have about when I got off the plane in India. It's quite, it's
I
really
remember my brother-in-law brought back a sign. It was a road sign and it said lane driving is sane driving to try to encourage people to stay in their lanes. And I always thought that was very funny. Like it's just a
but
different
you,
idea about what the road's for and how the road runs. So
yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting because it seemed like everyone was like in their vehicle that was in sequence of each other
Okay.
and in a flow state. Do you know what I
Interesting.
mean? And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I
but-
so I've been fascinated for a while about driving styles, regional driving styles, because when I was right out of college, I drove across the US to move from the East Coast to the West Coast for a little while, and then we drove back. And we really started to notice something that, my parents had talked about when I was younger, because we did a lot of car traveling. There's regional energy.
yeah.
Like people drive certain way. Like in Massachusetts, if there's 2 inches between you and the car in front of you, somebody will try to put their giant car in that space. And like in Georgia, people drive fast, but they drive the same, so they can all drive fast together. Like I don't know. And then you get to some place like DC where everybody there learned to drive somewhere else, and it's just chaos
Hmm.
because you've got national and international driving habits all trying to do the same roads, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
awful. It's
yeah.
awful. Yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Quite interesting. Mm.
Well, that could segue into what we were going to talk about, which is, we've been talking about trust and this
Yeah.
idea that how do you build trust? And we talked about, you make good promises and you keep them. And you and I were talking earlier about, what's a good promise? And we have some framework for that. And one of the things that came up was terms of satisfaction. How do you know that you've kept your promise? How do you know that it's been fulfilled? And
Hmm.
I wasn't even thinking about it, but drivers from a certain location, driving is you're accepting the promise that other people are going to follow the road rules, that they're going to understand those road rules the same way you do. So that's an implied promise, an implied terms of satisfaction.
Yeah. In
Um, the
agreement.
state the state says these are the rules, but people are all agreeing to abide by them. And, some places just stopping briefly and then going through a stop sign is okay. And other
Mm.
places that's really not okay. And so I think a lot of our life we deal with unspoken terms of satisfaction. And that's where we get into a lot of trouble
Yes.
because we assume that we have the same definition of complete and the same definition of satisfaction,
Yeah.
and we don't.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's important.
And
It's really, I mean, important on the road because you don't want to have a car hit you, but it's important in life too. I mean, I can think of times where huh, I ran into someone this week that I hadn't seen in a while, and they disappointed me
mm,
because they behaved in a certain way that was mean. It was mean. Not so much to me, but to someone else that I cared about. And it wasn't something I expected from them. And they broke a rule. They did not uphold, they disappointed me. They did not uphold our social contract of
mm,
how we were going to treat each other and other people. And it's a lot easier to set those standards ahead of time than it is to go back and repair it once it's been broken.
mm, yeah.
So what conversations do I need to have with other people? In order for us to get along well, maybe we need to talk about what this means. Or, like, oh, you know what a good one is? What's on time?
Hmm.
I am
Exactly.
notoriously bad at being on time to Zoom meetings because
I know.
every time, I know every time I go to get on a Zoom meeting, some other stupid thing happens. Like today,
Yeah.
my printer's in the other room. And I went in the other room to take some stuff off the printer and I looked at the clock and I went, oh, I have plenty of time. I didn't realize that battery operated clock is not correct because I never look at that clock in that room. So I was bamboozled by a broken clock or a
Mm,
slow clock. And so I thought I had more
oh,
time than I did. But most
yeah.
days it's things like I go in and it's not the right link or I can't find whatever. But just being on time. What is your definition of on time? If I lived in Germany, I would be a social pariah. There's no way I
Hmm.
could survive. 2 minutes late is the ultimate deal breaker in
Yeah.
most of those contexts. So um
And
definitions.
when I'm in Dubai, they say like we'll set a time. It depends on which, because there's 250 different nationalities there, so
Oh, that's true. That's yeah.
you got to
Again, the
switch your
complexity,
mind a
right?
lot to each culture
Yeah.
and what
Yeah.
time means, right?
Right.
But the Emiratis they're indigenous, and they say, just take your time. You'll set a time, but just take your time, and you don't expect them to be on time,
It's
compared to
interesting.
someone in Germany or
Well, and if
yeah.
you think about the traditional conditions under which people lived, if you're nomadic and you don't have timepieces with you and it's always bright sunny, so how are you supposed to know like a sundial is not going to work? And you have camels to deal with or animals that are going to have their own time frame, you
Hmm.
probably are going to develop a culture that has a little bit more fluidity around the idea of time
Yes,
than someone in a modern mechanized nuclear clock kind of place. It's interesting. It is interesting. Like what's the circumstances behind what the terms of satisfaction.
yeah.
And then sometimes it's personal preference. The story that I often tell is my husband and I used to argue all the time. We'd go to the movie theater. We don't really go to the movie theater anymore, which is also an interesting conversation about how the world is changing. But we'd go to the movie theater and we'd get in arguments because I would say we were late and he would say we weren't. Well, I like to get there early and see all the previews, make sure I had time to get popcorn, see all the previews. I wanted to be in my seat like 15 minutes before the movie started.
Hmm.
He hated the previews and never got popcorn. So to him, on time is you sit down and the previews are ending and you didn't have to deal with those stupid previews.
Hmm.
So we hadn't defined our terms. So we were
Yeah,
just arguing about a word and we hadn't defined our terms and we had to, then we could negotiate. Once we
yeah,
knew what our preferences were and we defined them,
yeah,
then we
standards.
can
Yeah,
then we can talk about it. And
yeah,
sometimes it's that we don't have to agree on the terms, but we have to know what they are to negotiate
exactly.
the
Yeah,
place in the middle. Yeah.
you have to be, you got to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And, you have to, looking at our framework for conditions of satisfaction, um, either making a request or an offer, we have key elements to follow
Hmm.
and to keep in mind for effectiveness. And that is number one is a committed speaker,
Yeah.
right? What that
Right.
looks
Right.
like body in action,
Well, full presence too. Fully
full
committed to
presence.
being there.
The
Yeah.
full presence is the committed listener,
Well, both.
you know?
The speaker has to be fully present too. How many times have you started a conversation and you realize, oh, I should have waited till later. I'm
Yeah.
not really in this conversation right now. So it's both people.
Or if you have someone like in the office, right? Like I've experienced this where, you go into the office to speak with someone behind a desk and or I could be on the phone, but someone is coming in and speaking to me like while I'm on hold. And it's like there's no
Yeah.
committed speaker here or listener,
Right.
right? I
Right.
can't listen to you right now. Or someone is texting, like they're
Yeah.
texting or
My husband
or
and
or
I,
walking past the hallway and talking while they're walking past someone's office. Like that doesn't
yeah.
work. That's
Hey,
where
by the way, this important thing that I'm going. And they're long gone. They're down the
yeah,
hallway. Yeah. Are you focused on the person or are you focused on the task? Is the conversation a connection or is the conversation a task? And if it's a task, you're very likely going to just rush through it to get to the next task.
yeah.
So that's part of that.
And that's where
That
the miscommunication, misunderstandings come in.
yeah.
And another element is, the future action and which involves the conditions of satisfaction and being clear, on what the task
Hmm.
is, right?
Right.
And I always get the other to repeat it back to me. Yeah, just
Well, if you look at that list, that the list that you're referencing, it's things like
what's that?
time.
I can't.
The list that you're referencing of our conditions,
Yeah.
things like time. So that happens a lot. Can you get this project done? Yes, I can get this project done. They come
Mm-hmm.
back the next day. Why isn't this project done? Oh, well, I can't
Mm-hmm.
get to it till next Tuesday. Everybody's disappointed, right?
Yeah.
So did you put the time constraints on it? Did you explain what done looks like? Can you do this project versus can you write a 6 page uh, summary and have 15 copies ready for the meeting? You're much more likely to be able to have satisfaction when you got that level of detail.
Yes.
And it's not detail, here's how you should do it. You're not micromanaging people. You are actually asking for what you need,
Mm-hmm.
which again, people rush and they don't think about that. Oh, they know, they've done this a million times. Well,
It's a shared understanding.
yeah,
And then speaking to your concerns on that as well.
yeah,
And I get on people's nerves sometimes when I'm saying I don't know. But I
yeah,
always declare myself a beginner.
yeah. Well,
Mm.
it goes back to maybe they've done it a million times, but they've probably done it a million different ways. Which version would you like? Or maybe
Yeah.
there's something new in this that they haven't tackled before or that you haven't asked for before.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and we're talking in work context, but it's all human interaction. Um, are you actually making a request? When we did an exercise in our coach training and we were supposed to make a request, and I said, are there any drinks left on the table? And I started laughing at myself and I realized that's not a request. That's this sort of weak way of feeling out whether you can make a request that I used to
Mm.
use as a request. When I was growing up, my mom would say, would anyone like some ice cream? Because she wanted ice cream and she didn't want to be the only one eating ice cream and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And it needed to look like she was being generous. I don't know, very complex. And it was a version of that. And just realizing, are you actually making requests? Are you framing it as a question, as a thing that can be delivered on?
And
So yeah,
bringing it back to the time frame on that and being
yeah,
clear on the time
yeah,
of the expectancy
yeah,
of the outcome. And if you can't make it on time, at least, with our work being in integrity,
yeah,
is declaring that I can't be on time. I'm going to be a few minutes late, or we need to reschedule. That this is not going to work for this time frame.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Staying on top of,
Communicate it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And the mood of a request, right? The
yeah,
mood space around that.
yeah.
How do we make a powerful request?
If you walk in and the person to whom you're speaking has just gotten terrible news, now is not the time to make a request.
Mm.
Or if they're suspicious or fearful or angry or distracted, we already went over distracted, but the mood of the request, there's a, yeah, what's the old saying? You can get more flies with honey than with vinegar. You know, do this thing versus, look, I need some assistance. This is really a valuable and important thing, and I know that you can do a good job. That's a very different request
Mhm.
versus get it done. I have no time for this. You erode the social fabric when you do that.
Mm.
You can get away with it every once in a while if you've made some decent deposits into that relationship, but you don't want to be doing that all the time.
This is what when we look at the context, right?
Hmm.
The information, the background information
Yeah.
that's needed in order to get the task complete, fulfilled.
The way I usually teach that one, if I'm teaching this in a class setting, I say the word float. Will you help me make it float? And you don't know if I mean ice cream and soda in a jar, in a
Mm.
cup, or I mean a large object on a tractor to go down a parade route. Without the context, you don't know what I'm asking for.
Mm.
There's a
And
lot of things.
even on this Zoom call, right? I'm just gonna acknowledge this, but the sound has been going in and out.
Oh,
So I was gonna ask you, like, are you like, can you speak up or can you check your sound?
it may be the connection because you're coming in a little bit patchy, but you seem fine.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. I mean, it's the technology. It it's what we have. Deep sigh. Tech Technology is awesome because you and I can talk to each other time zones apart, but it's
Mhm.
not so great if it's not coming in well.
But the importance of that's conditioned satisfaction, right? Is that I
Yeah.
acknowledge that I can't hear you very well. Can you speak up or can you adjust the sound?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely. I have to see to some terms of satisfaction for just a moment. My son is asking me a question. He needs urgently to find some car keys.
Okay, yeah.
All right, give me just a second. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Or we
Nice.
can just end it. We could end it there.
No, come back.
Okay, I'll come back. As we were recording.
Okay, you're back. I,
So he
I
needs to
paused it.
take, yeah, so my son needs to take his grandmother to an appointment, and he doesn't know where the car keys are.
Oh,
There's a series of requests and promises
yeah,
involved.
conditioned
Like,
satisfaction right there.
that's right. Satisfaction is she actually gets there, and in order to do so, he needs car keys.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, yeah, I think, we take things for granted, and that's where we usually end up having an issue.
Mm, yeah.
We assume that people understand things we haven't spoken. We assume we're on the same page. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Um, and they don't. One of the best examples that I ever had of that, it was Christmas, and my nephew's on the spectrum, and he was about 8 years old, and we had a bottle of wine to open, and my brother gave him a corkscrew because he liked mechanical things and he wanted to open it. So he's digging around, and I said, "What are you doing? Digging for oil? Just open the wine bottle." I was kind of teasing him.
Mm,
And he looked at me, he didn't say anything, opened the wine bottle, and he left. And okay. So about
mm.
20 minutes later, he comes back and he puts this piece of paper in front of me. And he says, if I was digging for oil, this is what it would look like. And he had illustrated the entire oil refining process. He had like the little pumps, and then he had like the derricks and the derrick pumps, and then he had like the flames shooting out of the refinery, and then he had trucks taking the
Wow.
gasoline
Yeah.
to the gas stations. And I looked at him like, this is amazing. Have you been studying this? And he looked at me with such pity in his eyes, and he said, now everybody knows this. I was like, so that he was really upset because he was very literal at that, especially at that point, that I wouldn't know that he wasn't digging for oil. Like he was very worried about me. But that was his way of making sure we were on the same page. So I have that little drawing that he made me, so now I will never confuse that again.
That's
But
great.
you know, we
That's
need
about
that.
the context, the background information.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He did a nice job of getting me up to speed. And yeah, and the pity was real. My poor pitiful aunt doesn't know how this works. But yeah, I mean, it that's that's a funny story and it was sweet, but sometimes we need to draw a picture.
mm,
Sometimes we need to draw a picture
yeah.
for each other.
Jennifer, I'm thinking maybe we should bring this to live, you know, on
So that when my son shows up, it's live. Yeah.
like
Um,
Facebook or Instagram. It goes on LinkedIn as well, but it I don't know, on the
you can
possible.
always, we can always post it on Facebook.
I think
Aren't you
on
posting? I
the,
thought you were posting them on Facebook.
is this the sixth episode or the seventh?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But speaking of flow, there's just been a nice flow, so I don't know.
Yeah,
My inclination is it's probably around six.
okay. Yeah. We'll see what's gonna happen next week.
So many things could be happening by next week. Yes, absolutely. Let's see what happens next week. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mhm. Have a great day.
You too.
Mhm.